So I'm very, very bullish. If we can make in India, and I think we are somewhere at midpoint of it. I think we're at the midpoint of learning as a country how to do things ourselves, how to be on time, how to do things without the boss overlooking behind your shoulder you to ship, right? Without that energy of a team sitting in that corner ke, jab tak char panch log nahi aayenge, main kaam karna shuru nahi karunga. I think we're at a brilliant, brilliant point in this country's work ethics and in the way we have worked and shipped products. So I think I'm very positive post-COVID.
Hello and welcome to the Startup Operator Podcast. I'm Roshan Cariappa. One of the heartening things during the second wave of the pandemic has been the way the private sector and startups have come together to affect change. Nobody knows this better than my guest today, Jas Gulati. Jas and a bunch of other founders created COVID Citizens to provide verified information and resources to people, and it has been immensely helpful during these times. Jas is also a veteran of the Indian startup ecosystem. He founded NowFloats in 2012 to help Indian SMBs with digital transformation, adopt digital tools to expand their business, and so on. NowFloats was later acquired by Reliance Jio in 2019. Jas is an active advisor and investor, and he has a ringside view of how things are evolving here. In this conversation, we spoke about how startups have changed over the last 10 years, some of the nuances of the Indian SMB market, and building for the Bharat user. This was a fun, short conversation, and I'm sure you'll like it, so do stick around. Hey, Jasminder, welcome to the Startup Operator Podcast. Thank you so much for making the time.
Hey, thanks, Roshan, for having me.
Yeah, again, I know that you have a very busy schedule today, so I really appreciate it. Let's start with the fantastic work that you've been doing with COVID Citizens. I think that's a great place to start. What has the response been like? What led you to start COVID Citizens?
COVID Citizens is about a month and 5 days old. So give or take 40 days. And we are all about making sure that the people who need all the COVID resources, such as oxygen, ICU, medicines, even elder care, perhaps even meals, all sorts of these resources are available through a very strong, verified, regularly updated database. So we put together a team of some very interesting and very exciting entrepreneurs who came together, as the wave 2 was peaking. And we are all absolutely delighted that it is, not so intense right now and things are better. But certainly if you go back and step back and, think about, a month before today, you would know how much of the pain it was to get resources. And we were not the only ones who were thinking like this, right? There were a bunch of people in the market who were doing some wonderful work on trying to bring these resources together. And we were, as I said, not the only ones, but we certainly decided to still continue doing this particular problem. And, the whole startup ecosystem has obviously come together and, tackled a lot of, the COVID, related issues across the country. But we put our head down and we wanted to do this only one thing, knowing very well that we would add a fair bit of tech and a fair bit of outreach on top of the work we do. So over the past 35, 40 days, we've been able to have about 6 lakh requests coming onto our platform. We've been, at least, 15 to 20, even at 20% people have clicked on the word that was the information helpful or not, which I believe is a very big number. And obviously these numbers are much lower now. I'm talking about till date numbers. What we essentially do is put this on a database, and in the front, why we are slightly unique than the other people is that we've got 4 front ends to this database. You can access this through our website, which is covidcitizens.org. You can, get help from Twitter, which is straightforward. But more importantly, you can get help from WhatsApp through the Introbot team, which is a part of our larger team, and also a live helpline side. So yeah, that makes us slightly unique because we've got footprints in all sorts of form and formats in which people are used to accessing data.
Right. Yeah. One of the heartening things has been the way, the private sector and startups have come together during the second wave, right, to really affect change. And we had Divyansh and Utkarsh from Introbot some time back. And, it must have been really gratifying for you to see all of this up close. Could you name some of the other founders and startups that were involved, during these tough times?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and then the list is very exhaustive. And, I typically don't take names with the fear of missing someone out. But certainly Avinash, who's my partner in crime, at SAS Bhumi, Excel Ventures. He's a big driving force along with me. There is Chaitanya at Wakefifth, who's really done a stellar job. There is Hema in United for social impact, who's done wonderful work. There's the whole Introbot team, which I referred earlier. They have been very, very, very keenly, doing the things that we have to do. Then there is people, again, very diversified people. We've got, Harvinder from Accenture. We've got a bunch of people from, the COVID Shield India. We have Suhas, and we've got a bunch of people up there who are really core and then, center forward in driving this. And, I must have missed out at least 2-3 names.
Right. Wonderful. We'll definitely, link to it in the description. Okay. So we skipped ahead to COVID citizens, but I'd like to take a step back now and introduce some of your other work to the audience. You've been a big company executive at Microsoft and Broadcom. You started up NowFloats back in 2012, and now you're involved with a bunch of founders as an advisor and an angel, right? So when you look back on your journey, how do you connect these dots?
Well, you either don't or you connect it very deeply. So, I swing between those two, given, what kind of a day I'm having. But yeah, certainly coming from a very large MNC background, a very global, a very large, Fortune 5 kind of a company, and being with them in their heydays of their life, and they still are very relevant, but certainly the heydays are not here. But yeah, being a part of that whole journey, a good 12-year stint across different businesses, different continents, moving then to Broadcom. Essentially, it's been a path of finding myself. I think I finally found my midlife crisis / resonance in NowFloats. And that, I think, is in many ways all the experience I had before we started NowFloats. One can look back and say, oh, wow, you know this because you worked here. And, so experiences do count and come together. And I felt that I was, in fact, in a very positive, unfair advantage to start NowFloats because, I had the big company thinking. I treated our startup from day one, as a somewhat established company, which, on a given day can be the worst thing you can do to a startup or perhaps the best thing you can do to your startup. So yeah, I look back and say, yes, it's just been multiple hoops in life and jumped a lot of them, and I've enjoyed every part of it.
Fantastic. So let's rewind the clock to 2012, right? When you started NowFloats. Those were very different circumstances to what we have right now. The ecosystem itself, I feel, was still developing. What has that journey been like? I mean, you've seen this for about 9 years now, right? You're going to enter the 10th year, perhaps tomorrow, next year, right? So what are some key milestone moments along the way that you remember?
Yeah, a couple of things come to my mind straight. One is, of course, the capital and the ecosystem, right? That was something which, has certainly matured very fabulously. I think India is at a very fantastic point. I mean, look at the number of unicorns, look at the talent, look at the problems people are solving, look at their revenues, look at their valuations, look at the inflow of capital. I think that's just awesome, right? And then there are many of them who are solving, very India problems, and then they've become very global, and that's just very heartening to see. And that we've seen it ringside, we've been, stateside, we've been courtside on this view, right? We've just seen it happen in front of our eyes. I think the other great thing that has happened, and perhaps NowFloats, perhaps did it well, was, we were 4 co-founders, and one of the founders was a design guy, and the other one was a tech guy, the third guy was a sales guy. And that ability to attract a motley mixture of people, even when the money wasn't chasing the startups, but you chose to do the right thing. I think that's really not only paid us off, but clearly has been something which we see increasingly become more important in the India ecosystem. We are seeing a lot of people with diverse backgrounds start up some very interesting companies, and I think that's really changed in the last 8 to 10 years.
Right. And it was also a time when not many people wanted to sell software products to Indian SMBs, right? I think, NowFloats was a pioneer in that, right? In the whole digitizing wave of SMBs, Indian SMBs at that. Because, SMB customers can be super demanding and their propensity to pay is, quite limited. But all of that has changed, right? I mean, there's a mad rush right now to build for Bharat, and which I think is a fantastic trend. So given your experience, what are some of the challenges of building and selling tech to these small and medium businesses?
Sure, but I want to step back and really answer your first thought that when we started selling to SMBs, we were perhaps in the truest sense the crazy ones. Everybody came to our table and laughed, if not really almost dismissed us. It was hard to start working with SMBs in India, and that also in potentially tier 3, tier 4 towns. And, at peak, NowFloats had 1,000 people and 42 offices across 36 cities. Now, that should give you some idea of not only the scale we had reached, but also very importantly, give you an insight that, we were trying to solve a very large, long tail, very distributed, diverse set of people, and we didn't give up. So yes, did we grow using a somewhat less scalable plan of digital acquisition? Yes, but that was the right time and the right point we were at to do that. But yes, I think SMBs in India are an incredible market. Step back and think about this. This is the largest this is the largest market in the free world. Hint added. This is the largest business market in the free world after consumers, right? So it is a very large, very lucrative, but very difficult, very, very difficult market. But yeah, in that lies, I think all the success of the unicorns in the past 2 or 3 years, call it the Udans or the Mishos or the, they've done Pagar books or the Khata books, right? They've done wonderfully well. And then that's where this market has matured. And then that's where I think there is a lot of depth left in this market still.
Right. Yeah, and it's also a very diversified market, right? Because when you call it MSME or SMB, you could refer to, anywhere between like a Kirana store to like a small factory to, something else, right? Like a services firm which is got like 30 people or whatever. So generalizing, all of their needs and serving them in a way that adds a lot of value is definitely a tough thing, as you mentioned. You've taken this core mission a step further with Digital Desh, right? Where you study the Bharat User. Mm-hmm. What is your vision with Digital Desh, and what are some surprising things that you've discovered?
So Digital Desh, to be honest, just sounds more visionary than it is. The first guy to accept it. What we do in Digital Desh and what perhaps makes us slightly different than anyone is that, we are very, I certainly, in the core of it, I'm very inquisitive about how lives are changing on the smartphone. And the team, along with me, we've been traveling across the country. We've done that, 9 times now. The 10th one is on its way. We just got a couple of very smart students from Ashoka University who are putting their head down and doing the 10th Digital Desh. This one is a virtual drive, of course. But the point is, how do you really find out what customers need? How do you really find out what their behaviors are? And how do you use those insights, not sitting in your own room as a mid-level or a senior exec, but out on the road? I think what we were only able to do successfully is take the time out to drive, because India is a brilliant place to drive, right? Everybody opens up, right? You just go into the interiors of this country and, you have to be really talented not to get invited for a chai, right? In any corner of this country. Add that to the fact that we take a product guy or as I said, a mid-level person or a senior person to the drive who's listening into these conversations, firsthand. That is what Digital Desh is all about. I think it's no rocket science at all. But the fact that, you have taken the time out to go travel whatever these 200 miles or 300 kilometers are, and you sat down with someone who could be a potential user of yours. You've seen it you've seen it in firsthand. You've seen if the person uses an iPhone or Android. You've seen it for yourself what the homepage looks like. You've seen it for yourself what the WhatsApp groups look like. You've seen it for yourself. In which language does he make a phone call versus type? These are insights you cannot get from a survey form. These are insights you cannot get without being in that little corner of that city. And then that's what has been the whole driving force behind Digital Desh.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I think overall, we tend to underestimate the qualitative and overestimate the quantifiable aspects. I always say that, 20 conversations with your users and customers will serve you more than any funnel or, charts that you can look at, right? And especially when it comes to the Bharat user, we all have some preconceptions in terms of, how they behave or what they use and what they will pay for as such. But when you go through such an immersive experience like the Digital Desh experience, you would have seen some things like some of these preconceptions shatter, right? And from your experience of having seen this, what is your advice on building for the Bharat user? I mean, what are some things we should know about the Bharat user?
So I can throw in a couple of things which are insight, and somewhat successfully being implemented by us. And there are many places we failed, obviously, in even identifying some problems, even though we are so deep. But, I'll give an example. There's this misconception that, Bharat users don't pay. And I'm talking about small businesses. There's this misconception for years. Oh, you will never be able to take money out of them. At peak, NowFloats only had one product and one pricing at peak. I'm talking about pre-COVID days. That was 30,000 rupees paid annually upfront.
Wow.
And today, of course, we've, done some innovations and we had to, price it right for the market. We've tweaked some product. We've gone into vertical. So we are now between 5,000 starting and still about 35,000 annual plans. And how many paid customers have we got life to date of our existence? 85,000 paid customers. So, that misconception that India में कोई पैसे नहीं देता या इतने पैसे नहीं देता, वो सारी misconceptions, ठीक नहीं है. और वो कैसे हमने किया? Obviously because of the team that we had and our co-founders, but certainly because of what we had learned from the market. That there is depth in the market. There is paying parity in the market for the right product. So stuff like this, this is just one of the many examples, which you can't get, sitting in non-tier 2, tier 3 markets yourself and then focusing on them.
Right. And, one of the key revolutions over the last 5 years, indeed, I think 10, 20 years has been the Jio revolution, right? And of course, here too, you've had a ringside view, with Jio having acquired NowFloats in 2019. What is the significance of that revolution? You must have seen that firsthand. And, what's it like to work with the Jio guys?
No, absolutely. I think, Jio, being really the backbone of the country, really having, really democratized internet and its access has been very, very valuable to where the country is today. And, I would absolutely, risk the statement that many unicorns wouldn't have been built if Jio wasn't there. So I would risk saying that statement. But yes, I mean, they are Jio and our relationship is quite brilliant because, it's very synergetic, right? I know when Reliance first came to our table and Jio came to our table, we were talking about all the possibilities that we could do together. And, and each one of those possibilities, when we sat down the first time, would transcend at least 10 years. There was 10 years of business to be done just on that first day of sitting together. And then those are the kind of energy and synergies that you see that, we both understood the market very well. We both knew what we could do in this market. We both knew what the synergies of the two teams were. So from that perspective, I think Jio, has some very, very strong leadership and execution, which I think is unparalleled. And certainly glad to be a part of that.
Right. So let me hark back to the startup ecosystem question, right? Because, you've seen this entire thing for about 10 years now, right? And in the time that you've operated in the ecosystem, how have you seen founders themselves change? Like, I've been talking to founders on the podcast and, we're coming up on about 100 guests next week. And, I just find them scary ambitious. They're able to think without constraints, and it's a different mindset altogether, right? And what have you seen with the founders that you speak with and interact?
No, in fact, stay with your statement. No point of, adding value to what you've said. I mean, this is absolutely right. I mean, there is this new harvest of founders with crazy ambitions and crazy abilities to execute at scale. I mean, unforeseen, right? I mean, that I told you has changed so much over the past 8 to 10 years, and founders solving very, very unique problems, so solving very scalable problems. And more importantly, I think, the founder quality is changing so much so that, when people come to present their business plan or their idea, most of them are already at a certain decent momentum, which NowFloats took, like, for example, 3 years, and then people are raising their angel rounds after that kind of momentum.
Right.
And that's, I think, what has changed. I think the newer founders are very cognizant of the market. They're very smart. They know they have to get at the very least a product market fit to move to the next round. And that's beautiful. That maturity is just very heartening.
Yeah. I think Indians by nature are very competitive. I think startups have become the new age JE in some sense, I would say, right? So
Correct.
you're an advisor and you're an investor right now. And when you sit on the other side of the table, what are some things that you are cognizant of? What is the two or three things that you have to tell founders on business building and on the startup journey itself? Any words of advice that you usually end up telling a lot of people?
Yeah, I mean, I'm an impatient person, I think, by design. And, most of my feedback to anybody I meet will revolve around, do it yourself and do it at speed. I mean, those are the two things which swing everything for me. You will see that commonality in almost all the feedback that I'll give. I mean, there is no point telling a founder a strategic input. I don't think that's valid anymore. These guys are like super smart. There's no point, helping them with connects. I mean, they'll hustle their way through, right? I mean, those are perhaps the only two things I ever advise on. Is my standard question is ke तूने ये खुद क्यों नहीं किया, right? Everybody's India's at that next stage, in my opinion. We still have the last remains of the tendency to wait for someone to help us, right? We are the classic. Somebody will come to my house and clean my house, right? That doesn't come naturally to us as a country. And that shows up in our workplace / startup. So that's one thing I keep harping about. And the second thing is this whole idea of speed. सोच रहा हूँ, देख रहा हूँ, करूँ कि नहीं. And I keep saying, in this new world, you cannot say ये करूँ या वो करूँ. करना तो सब कुछ है आपको. This is a very and world. And that's the only advice I give to startup founders now. And not that I have many of them, but certainly to people who care to listen to me.
Right. Before we let you go, so much has happened over the last couple of months, right? And not the best of times by any stretch. Looking forward to this post-COVID world that we're going to live in, right? And hopefully all of us will do well. What are you optimistic for going forward?
I actually feel startups born in the COVID times are really at a very significant advantage than others, because they have born with these new realities. They have chosen to do something when they could have kept their mouths shut and sit at home and get their salaries and stuff like that. But yeah, so I am a fairly optimistic person from a macro perspective. I think these are very, very interesting times for companies and innovation and new ways. I mean, for example, I am super fond of work from home, and ask me why. And I have been all my life an office person. I've just it gives you a hint on how quickly I change my attitudes towards life. Right. I've always been, wake up early, get to office, not in my initial early years, but certainly in the last 10 years, I've been the office first, start sending your emails by 8:30 a.m. That's who I was. And now you look at this work from home and, I'm in office at 8:30 a.m. and, the first guy used to troop in at 10, 9:30, 10, 11. What is that excuse left anymore to work from India? I mean, look at what COVID has done. ना सुबह का ट्रैफिक है, ना पानी की प्रॉब्लम है, ना that person who has to come and clean my house has come on time, ना आपको खाना सर आज मैंने ना खाना खुद बनाना पड़ा, ना आपके पास ट्रैफिक का प्रॉब्लम है. So I'm very, very bullish. If we can make in India, and I think we are somewhere at midpoint of it, if we can, and I hope COVID really ends and we don't you have to wait till something better comes in life to move on. But I think we're at the midpoint of learning as a country how to do things ourselves, how to be on time, how to do things, without the boss overlooking, behind your shoulder, you to ship, right? Without that energy of a team sitting in that corner ke, jab tak 4-5 log nahi aayenge, main kaam karna shuru nahi karunga. I think we're at a brilliant, brilliant point in this country's work ethics and in the way we have worked and shipped products. So I think I'm very positive post-COVID. I hope that we learn some of these things that we've learned in the last 2 years and carry them forward in our professional lives for the rest of the things that we do.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think overall, we've all manufactured 2-3 hours out of thin air in these times. And also, I mean, given that, there's no one really looking over our backs, I mean, it's up to us to fend for ourselves and to make the best of the time that we have, right? So This was a quick-fire, wonderful conversation with you, Jas, and I'd love to do a follow-up sometime. But thank you so much again for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us on the Startup Operator podcast. Thank you.
Absolutely, Roshan. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.